In this lecture, we're going to dive into the chain prompt engineering technique. This method is all about creating a sequence of prompts that build upon one another, guiding the model towards coherent and structured responses. Each prompt in the sequence is crafted to get a specific response, refining and directing the output. This technique is especially handy for generating long-form text and code, since it helps us get accurate responses while avoiding incomplete or overly long outputs. Chain prompting often includes other styles like role-based prompting and few-shot prompting, which can be part of a larger sequence of prompts to achieve the desired outcome. To demonstrate chain prompting, let's say you're a content writer tasked with writing a blog post about traveling to Paris in December. We'll break this task down into a sequence of prompts to show how context can be added to create a complete blog post. So we're going to start by entering the first chain prompt into ChatGPT, and that is write an outline for a blog post about traveling to Paris, and in brackets France, in December. And once I press enter, in no time, ChatGPT will return an outline that looks pretty good. Observe the response generated by the model, which should provide a solid foundation for the post. I started with this prompt because we're going to build up a sequence. With each prompt, we'll add some context that ChatGPT can work with. The reason being, it will return better outputs than asking it to write something coherent from the get-go. Again, notice if I scroll back up to the top that I'm starting my prompts with instructions. Let me now break down this prompt, even though it's very small, into 4 main components as I've done for others. So to begin, we have the task, and we instructed ChatGPT to write a post about traveling to Paris in December. It's a very simple task, and it sets the goal for the output. Second, input. In this case, we provided no additional input other than the topic of traveling to Paris in December, which we can see here. This is what the model will base its response on. Third, output. Our desired output is an outline for a blog post. So not the blog post in its entirety, but just the outline. So that sets the scope of the response too. And then finally, the fourth component is context. And we didn't provide any specific context about Paris, only that the outline should focus on traveling there in December. Now, by breaking down each prompt this way, we can better understand how the task, input, output, and context work together to guide ChatGPT's responses. Now, moving forward, what I want to do is shorten the outline because it looks a little bit too long for me. So the next prompt that I want to add is simply shorten the outline to key points. And again, in no time, ChatGPT will condense the outline to include only the main points that it thinks that we should write about in this specific blog article. And this prompt that we just entered, which was shorten the outline to key points, is the second element in the chain of prompts we're going to input. Of course, it should go without saying that we wouldn't be able to condense an outline if we didn't produce one in the first place. Now let me explain the second prompt that we entered in our sequence. So first up, we have the task, and the task is pretty simple. We want ChatGPT to shorten the outline it provided to us. And the input in this case is the previous outline that ChatGPT generated, so we can see that here, and we can see that it's pretty lengthy, hence we wanted to shorten the outline to the key points. Moving on to the output for this prompt, the output we're looking for is of course an outline, but we want it shorter, which it did produce for us. So it made it more concise than the one it initially provided. And finally, the fourth element of a prompt, context. There isn't any specific context in this second prompt that we entered. other than the previous output, which you could class serves as context in this situation. So at this point, we've entered 2 prompts into our sequence. So now let's go ahead and add a third one. Let's dive into the third prompt in our sequence, which will help us expand upon the bare outline that we now have. So the prompt we're going to use for this is write 1 paragraph for the introduction. And we can see that we have an introduction if we go to the top here. So what I'm going to do now is press enter on this prompt, and we will see that ChatGPT will quickly generate the introductory paragraph for our blog post based on the outline that it created earlier. As usual, let me now break down this prompt into the 4 main components for you. So to begin, for this prompt, we have the task, and the task here is to write the introductory paragraph for the blog post that we're working on. The input for this prompt is the outline that ChatGPT generated in our previous prompt. And if we scroll up to introduction, we can see that under that it has a bullet point, which is overview of traveling to Paris in December. But let's go back to our prompt, which was write 1 paragraph for the introduction. The output for this is that we're aiming for a single paragraph introduction, not multiple paragraphs. Although the model might sometimes veer off course, our goal is to define the task in a way that steers it towards our desired outcome. And finally, the context for this prompt is simply the outline we generated earlier without any additional specific context. So now we've successfully created a sequence of 3 prompts, each one building on the previous output. This chain prompting technique helps us generate a coherent and structured final result. Now, I feel the introductory paragraph that it generated is a bit wordy for my taste. I'd prefer an introduction with shorter and snappier sentences. So let me give ChatGPT another prompt, and that will be to edit this introductory paragraph that it just wrote for us. So I'm going to enter condense the introduction using shorter sentences. As always, once I've pressed enter, we will see our output within moments, and once that output appears, I'll then go into breaking down the prompt into the 4 main components. So that did take a little while longer than the previous outputs, but it did get us what we wanted. So as promised, let me break down the prompt into the 4 components. So first, we have task. And in this case, we want ChatGPT to revise the introduction using shorter sentences. And we make that very clear. The second component, input. The input for this prompt is the introductory paragraph that it generated in the previous prompt. The third component of this prompt, so output, is that what we're looking for is a more concise introductory paragraph. So we want it to output the same information sort of that it generated before, but we want it condensed using shorter sentences. And finally, context for this prompt. Once again, we don't have anything specific related to Paris, but we can say that it is the previous output. By adding this new prompt to our sequence, we've continued to refine the blog post to better align with our preferences. That's the power of chain prompting, guiding the model step by step to achieve your desired outcome. So now that we've got our introduction sorted out, let's add the final element to this chain of prompts that we've been exploring throughout this lecture. So here's the next prompt. Write a paragraph to go after the introduction about my company, and then in brackets I'm going to enter historical walkers, which is a made-up company that may or may not exist, and then I'm going to follow that on with I offer walking tours for $40. use the ADA, attention, interest, desire, and action copywriting formula. There we go. So this is an interesting prompt. So let me enter it and then I'll break it down once it's given us its output. And as quickly as that, we have our output from ChatGPT. So let me break down that prompt that we just added onto the end of our chain. So to begin, we have the task. And the task here is that we're asking ChatGPT to write a paragraph about my mystical walking tour company, and we want it to do so using the ADA copywriting formula, which stands for attention, interest, desire, and action. Second, we have input, and we're giving extra information here. So we're giving the company name, which is Historical Walkers, and we're giving the price for walking tours, which is $40. And we're giving that to help craft the response from ChatGPT. Thirdly, output, which is the third element of a prompt, we want a captivating paragraph that encourages people to book a walking tour with the company. And we can see that it has provided that for us. And finally, context. And this is similar to the input as we've provided specific details about the company. So we provided the company name, Historical Walkers, and the amount of the tours, which is $40. And after we submitted the prompt, you saw how ChatGPT generated a paragraph for us, just as we wanted, that we can include in our blog post. It's truly amazing how powerful chain prompting can be when you use it iteratively to improve your work. The more you practice and refine your prompts, the better results you'll get. Now, I'm not going to walk you through the entire blog post creation process, as doing so would be repetitive, and you can just follow the same steps that we've covered. For instance, you can ask ChatGPT to write a paragraph for the next section, which is whether and what to pack. You can then go through the process of editing it with another prompt. One thing to note here, for very specific information, like weather in this case, or festival dates, ChatGPT might not be completely accurate. And that's where you might need to provide some context, for example, as we did with the company name and the price of walking tours. That said, even if you don't provide the context for such things such as weather and addresses, ChatGPT will kind of guesstimate and you can correct it later, but it's something that you do need to be wary of because it's not 100% factually correct with certain information like this. So I did want to point that out while you're here. But what we've done here overall is just one example of how you can harness this power of chain prompt engineering. Another example that comes to mind, so another possible use case, is having ChatGPT act as an interviewer, researcher, or in other roles, and then by giving it a series of prompts, you can help it build more context through the conversation, leading to increasingly accurate and relevant outputs. Now, I hope you enjoyed this lecture on chain prompt engineering. It's a powerful technique that you can utilize to create more complex and engaging content. I invite you to join me in the next lecture where we'll dive into a mini project together. See you there.